This is the DFS First Look Podcast, breaking down everything you need to know for daily fantasy sports in 15 minutes. This is your host, Joshua Schwager.
Welcome to episode 2 of the DFS First Look Podcast. Today is June 3rd, and we'll be looking at the 15-game slate that is ahead of us today. There are quite a few interesting matchups. My eye is closely locked into the Minnesota Twins versus Boston Red Sox game, where Eduardo Rodriguez will get his second start. In his first game, he threw a legit 8-inning shutout. Let's see how he might fare in the second game by breaking down his advanced metrics. Alright, so starting out with the pitchers to use in cash play, tonight's first option is Chris Sale. Without the win, I have him projected at right around 31.9 points. That's a lot of points. It mainly comes from his ability to go about 7 to 8 innings with a K9 above 10. He's keeping his walks semi-low at about 2.14 a game, his home run rate at about close to 1 a game. About 10% of the fly balls are going out of the park. When you look at his left on base and BIBIP, it kind of suggests that what he's doing right now in the current is normal. So his FIP of 2.9 and xFIP of 308 is kind of what you can suggest going forward. He struggled currently against left-handeds, giving up 353 on base percentage, but he makes it up sort of with the right-handed because he's striking them out at an alarming 10.19 K9 rate. Looking at today's slate against Texas, you can expect him to strike out a lot as long as he can keep the ball inside the park. I don't expect Texas to be able to handle Chris Sale, even though they are a team that generally knows how to hit for average. His ability to keep the ball down and to strike out those that are on base should keep Chris Sale as your number one option on the day. Looking at our number 2 play of the day would actually be James Shields. James Shields has had an alarming 1.29 strikeouts per inning at about an average of 6 innings a game. That's a lot of strikeouts, and today against the Mets, you could expect him to strike out quite a bit more. Looking at his left on base, though, he's leaving about 85% of the people on base. You can credit that directly back to his alarming strikeout potential, but overall, that 84.9% is not sustainable. You should see that come down to about 75%, even if he is still striking out a bunch. You can see this reflected directly in his FIP of 4.38 so far in the past with his left on base so high, but going forward, as that averages out, he's actually projected an xFIP of 2.19. That's actually really good. His Sierra is right at 2.72. His K9 for righties is at 13.26, which is stupid high, but he is letting a lot of people on base for both right-handers and left-hitters. But again, because of his strikeout potential, it does not matter as long as he keeps them in the park. As the third option today, I'm looking directly at Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels is going up against Cincinnati, who he has been alarming to. He has done so much against Cincinnati. Cole Hamels has limited the current Reds lineup to a sub 2.0 batting average in over 130 plate appearances. That's really low. Cole Hamels knows how to shut down the current Reds lineup. I mean, just looking at Billy Hamilton, somebody that you would expect to be able to at least get on base a certain percentage, even though he's not. He's just incredibly fast. He's actually never reached the bases against Cole Hamels in a 7 at-bats. That's not saying too much because it is only 7 at-bats, but it is to suggest that Cole Hamels has had a great career against the Reds. Currently boasting a strikeouts to inning ratio close to 1, and he's going about 7 innings deep in every single game. You can expect that to carry him past Cincinnati and be a prime target for cash and GPP play. I really like Cole Hamels on today's slate. I have him ranked as 3rd, but I could see him finishing as high as 1st. Now in 4th, I have Corey Kluber. He gets the boost down because his hit score against Kansas City is actually at 28.82, which is really high for a matchup. In comparison, Cole Hamels finished at 19. So the thing that carries him, though, is his average innings is around 7, and he has the K9 of 11.27. So he's going to go deep in the game and get you a lot of strikeouts. And for fantasy purposes, that really is predominant statistics that you look at, even though it does say Kansas City should get a lot more. If Corey Kluber was going up against a worse team, say the Philadelphia Phillies or even the Houston Astros, you would expect that number to skyrocket. He wouldn't be at 27.66. He might actually finish 1st on the day, probably closer to 35 points, where I have Chris Sale closer to 31. But I really like Corey Kluber in the 4, and if he can keep people off base and off scoring, he could finish as high as first as well. The 5th option on today's cash slate is John Lester, who has been phenomenal lately. Currently, though, he is boasting an 8.76 K9, which should improve as he continues to pitch as well as he is. His FIP is around 3.46, and his xFIP is at 3.2. So as you can see, he's kind of starting to level out just a little bit. He's struggling very mightily against the lefties, though. He's letting about 40% of lefties on base, which is not good. That'll do it for our cash plays for right now. Let's go ahead and look at pitchers to stack against. The first pitcher you got to look at to stack against today is Jason Vargas. He's currently projected only 13 points by my projection model, so that's not very good. It's also contributed to the fact that he doesn't know how to strike people out. He only goes 5 innings in a game, but that's because he lets almost 2 home runs happen every 9 innings. He's not keeping people on base. They're all getting off. His ERA is at 5.6. His xFIP is at 4.85. This is just a bad overall pitcher. I would look to target Jason Vargas tomorrow against the Cleveland Indians, so stack a lot of the Cleveland Indians. I know Jason Kipnis is getting higher and higher in price, but he's likely going to be worth it tomorrow. The second pitcher that I'm going to target tomorrow might actually surprise you, and it's Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez has done great so far, posting a 2.03 ERA in his multiple starts so far this year. He's striking out less than one person an inning, and he's going about 6 2/3 innings deep every single outing. He's walking close to 3 people a game, and he's letting up only about half a home run every game. Those aren't numbers to suggest that he's going to do bad, but when you look at his xFIP of 4.74 and his SIERA of 4.71 and his ability to get crushed by right-handed pitchers, I think he lines up very well against the Chicago White Sox tomorrow, and I would stack multiple right-handed batters against Nick Martinez tomorrow and hope that 2.03 ERA gets broken down just a little bit and gets closer to his 4.06 FIP and his 4.74 xFIP. The next person that I'm targeting tomorrow is Taijuan Walker versus the New York Yankees. I have him projected at 17.73 points with a K9 of 8.29, so he really knows how to do the damage and might actually be a decent GPP option if he can keep the New York Yankees from hitting, which I doubt he can. He's walking close to 4 people a game. His ERA is at 6.18. His xFIP is 4.43. So he's gonna look better as it goes on, but right now he's just terrible. He's letting more than 35% of the batters on base. I would target somebody as a team as good as the New York Yankees to really exploit Taijuan Walker. The next, as I mentioned in yesterday's podcast, is Phil Hughes. Phil Hughes has terrible statistics against the Boston Red Sox. Pablo Sandoval and Dustin Pedroia alone lead off in BVP, but BVP doesn't mean too much. But what it does suggest is that the handedness of the Boston Red Sox hitters matches up very well against Phil Hughes. So as you can expect by looking at his advanced metrics, that Boston has a lot of really good right-handed hitters, which they do. Dustin Pedroia in his 40 at-bats against Phil Hughes has allowed 5 home runs at 342 average with 8 extra base hits. And Pablo Sandoval has 443 against the right-handed throwers, and it actually puts him close to the top of my third base projections. That'll actually do it for the pitchers that I'm stacking against in today's game. I think that Jason Vargas, Nick Martinez, Taijuan Walker, and Phil Hughes are good enough options for stacks for you to see profitability if you were to stack against them correctly and you get your secondary bats well. Now let's take a look for targets and GPP play. Obviously, as mentioned before, James Shield, with that alarming strikeout potential, has the ability to get a very high score. His 1.28 strikeouts an inning actually tops the charts. He has a 25.72 hit score against him, so it's actually projected that the Mets could do fairly well against him, but his K9 is so high that if he can keep the walks down and the hits down, that he should finish incredibly high, which is more than practical against a team like the New York Mets. The next is going to be Francisco Liriano, who's going against the Giants. He's actually in a decent ballpark for what he's going up against, even though the hit score does have him at 26.8. The Giants have been hitting really well lately, but he has alarming strikeout potential. I would watch for a very big game from Francisco Liriano. As mentioned earlier, Corey Kluber is a great option. I have him as my third. Other targets that you have to look at, it would be Lance McCullers. I think that he has such an alarming strikeout potential that you have to give him a shot against the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles do have close to a 30-hit score against him, so I'm not projecting Lance McCullers to have that great of a game. But I think if you're throwing out GPP options and you need to mix and match and you need somebody small with great upside, I would look at Lance McCullers as that option. All right, so now let's look directly into the batters by looking at cash play for batters. I think that Russell Martin versus Gio Gonzalez is your primary cash option. He has a weighted on base average of .561 against the handedness of Gio Gonzalez and an ISO of about 333. Those are great numbers. I think that you have to look at Stephen Vaught also. Stephen Vaught versus everybody right now is great numbers. Some cheaper options to consider might be JT Realmuto versus John Lester. John Lester is really good, but JT Realmuto does stack up fairly well against him. In cash play for first base, you have to be looking at Adrian Gonzalez. Adrian Gonzalez is a consistency monster. You also have to be looking at Mark Teixeira against Taijuan Walker. I know that people label him as a GPP play, but when you look at his 428 on base, weighted on base average versus the handedness and his 481 ISO, you have to be thinking of Mark Teixeira in any format. Mark Teixeira looks like an amazing play tomorrow. Obviously, you're going to be looking at the Paul Goldschmidts, the Eric Hosmers. Carlos Santana actually stacks up very well tomorrow, and Anthony Rizzo versus Dan Herron. They all look like great plays. But one person I did want to mention was Adam Lind. He's currently hitting 484 against John Lackey. That's really good, and it's been 31 plate appearances, so that's a decent enough sample size for us to actually consider it somewhat valid. I would look to use Adam Lind as a cheaper option in cash games and maybe an outside shot at the GPP. At second base, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you have to be looking at Jason Kipnis. Jason Kipnis is a monster, and he's going up against Jason Vargas, who is the exact opposite of a monster. He gets blown up on a regular basis. On FanDuel, I would look at Jimmy Paredes. He's been phenomenal this year. He's currently going through a bit of a route, but the numbers do suggest that he should kick it around. I really like Aaron Hill against Michael Fulton-Newix. I think that Aaron Hill should have a good game. His numbers suggest that it is a model of consistency. Always be looking at Howie Kendrick. Howie Kendrick has been so phenomenal since he's been back. Ben Zobrist, Brian Dozier, and Dustin Pedroia, as mentioned earlier, are also great cash play options. When looking at third base, Yasmani Tomas sticks out to me again as the best GPP option. But for cash play, like we're talking about right now, Josh Donaldson should be your primary cash focus. His weighted on base of 544 is just phenomenal. Alex Rodriguez finishing in second for my cash option against Taijuan Walker. I just love the Yankees versus Taijuan Walker. I actually think they're going to do a lot of damage. They know how to hit for average and they know how to hit for power. I would look to hit a lot of the Yankees versus Taijuan Walker, even in cash play, just where they fit. And on FanDuel, Alex Rodriguez has been cheaper than most third basemen lately. I also like Pablo Sandoval, as mentioned earlier on the podcast, and Matt Carpenter versus Jimmy Nelson. I think that those are enough of cash play options for you to really just get a good understanding of the rest of your lineup. If you need a cheaper play, maybe look at Martin Parado against John Lester, but I would probably say that Alex Rodriguez is the cheapest I'm willing to pay in third base. You need a lot of points from your third base position, since your second base and catcher options are generally going to provide you less points, because the only person that can provide a third base potential output would be a Jason Kipnis, who is going at an alarming rate. In outfield, if Randall Grichuk is playing, I really like him again. He's been phenomenal since he's been up. He hasn't had amazing games, but he has been very, very solid. Josh Reddick sticks out very abruptly, along with Bryce Harper. Their weighted on base average is so phenomenal right now, sitting above 4. I also like Marlon Byrd. Even though all of the Reds look bad against Cole Hamels, I think in cash play, Marlon Byrd could be consistent enough and might be the only person to hit Cole Hamels tomorrow. In a cash game, I'm looking at him, but in GPP, I am not looking at Marlon Byrd, simply because the runs and RBIs might not be there. But he might get off a dinger. He might get on base twice. Marlon Byrd has great handedness ability against Cole Hamels. I really like Justin Upton tomorrow, Mookie Betts, David Murphy, Michael Brantley, Brandon Moss, Colby Rasmus, Brett Gardner. That's topping my list for cash play. That will do it for our cash play. I think that will also do it for our podcast. Thanks for checking out episode 2 of the DFS First Look podcast. I look forward to doing this some more, and I hope that we're making more than profitable. All right, signing off. Bye.